Good morning, grade fours, and welcome to another natural science lesson brought to you by WorksheetCloud. Remember that throughout this lesson, if you've got any questions, please email them to grade4@worksheetcloud.com. My name is Miss Kun, and I hope that you are ready for today's science lesson. Let's begin. So today we are going to learn all about the structure of plants. Plants are all around us, and it's important to know the different parts of the plant and the different functions of these parts. But before we begin and dive straight into plants, we are going to start our lesson with the skill. Now, I always like to incorporate different skills throughout teaching because it gives us an opportunity to really think and to think outside the box and to expand our thinking. Remember, in science, it's always important to continually ask questions about the world around you. Ask, why does this happen? How does it happen? When does it happen? Always ask questions, because that's how we make discoveries and we get answers and we expand our knowledge. So let's look at this particular skill. So we are going to look at what's called the KWL skill. And what it stands for is know, want to know, and learned. Now, in order to get the skill, I want you to please pause the video, get yourself a pen or pencil and a piece of paper, because you are going to need something to write with. Right. So this particular skill is an amazing thinking skill. And on your piece of paper, I want you to draw yourself a little table with 3 columns. The first heading is you're going to write the word know. The second heading is you're going to write the words want to know. And your third column and your third heading is learned. Now, this skill is really cool because I want you to write, let's say, 5 points of anything that you already know about plants and the structure specifically of plants. So in this first column over here, you're going to write 5 points on anything that you know on the structure of plants, absolutely anything. Right, once you have done that, then you are going to move on to your second column. You are now going to write 5 points on absolutely anything about the structure of plants that maybe you would like to know, or you would like to know more information about. Maybe it is certain questions that you've always been asking and you would really like to find out the answers. Maybe you could ask, why are leaves green? Why are some roots different to other roots, for example? Why are certain flowers shaped the way that they are? What gives bark its strength, or anything to do with plants? But this is a thinking skill. So this column can always be a little bit challenging because you really have to think. And maybe pause the video, go outside or take a look out of the window, or maybe you've got a plant in your house and look at that plant and start thinking about that plant. Why does this happen? How does this happen? When does this happen? And so on. So far you've written 5 points about anything to do with that you already know with the parts of the plant. Then you have also written 5 points on any type of question or anything that you would like to know more about the parts of plant. Now, this third column, learnt, we are going to put that on hold. We are going to pause right there. And we are going to come back to that third column at the end of the lesson. Right, so already, before we've even started this lesson, your mind is open, you're starting to think, and you're ready to learn. Okay, let's go. So our objectives today, we are going to start off with the roots, and we're going to work our way up the plant. We're going to go to the stem. We're going to look at the leaves of plants, the flowers, and lastly, we're going to look at the function of the seeds. Okay, starting off with roots. So before we start off with the roots, let's have a look at the basic structure of plants and where all these components are. So we have our roots, as you can see on this beautiful picture. We then move on to the stem. We have our leaves, our flowers, and the seeds that are inside the flowers, or that are formed within the flowers, and I'll explain that a little bit later. So starting off with the roots. Now, I'm sure some of you possibly have seen certain roots. So we get certain roots that are spread out, certain roots that are quite narrow and straight and almost go really deep into the ground, and we get various types of roots. Now today specifically, we're not going to go into the different types of roots, but we are going to go into the function of roots. So the first thing that we want to just make sure that we establish is that plant roots are normally found underground. So generally speaking, roots are found underground. Roots have very important functions. The first function that we are going to look at with roots is that roots anchor and stabilize the plant in the ground. So I've highlighted this word anchor because I want you to imagine that you're at the beach and you're standing on the beach, and just where the waves crash onto the shore, I want you to plant your feet into the beach, and I want you to give yourself a little bit of a wiggle, and your feet start to sink and they start to be anchored. That all of a sudden, as the waves start crashing, you don't move and you don't rock all over the show. And that is because you've got a firm anchorage into the beach sand. Now, roots are very similar to that particular concept. Roots are there to anchor the plant into the ground and to stabilize the plant. The word stabilize, it's to keep the plant stable, to not rock and move all over the show. So roots anchor the plant to the ground. The second function of roots is that roots absorb water and nutrients from the soil through the root hairs. These are then transported to the rest of the plant. So remember, it is very important that roots are spread in the ground. And either they are spread out, and those types of roots, we call them adventitious roots, or roots, certain roots go really deep and down into the ground, and we call those a taproot system. And and roots are there to absorb all the nutrients from the soil, absorb the water, and funny enough, they have got these tiny little hairs, just like hairs on your arm. Well, I've got lots of blonde hair on my arm, but just like hairs on your arm, these roots are also full of hairs. And in the next slide, I'll show you a picture of what it looks like. And the nutrients in the water are actually absorbed through the root hairs into the roots, and then they travel to the rest of the plant to where the plant needs it the most. And the last function of roots is that some plants actually store the food they make in the roots, like potatoes or carrots that we can eat. Now, I wonder if any of you knew that. Some of you that are sitting there, that you love your carrots and you love your potatoes and beetroot, some of the foods we actually eat, and those are actually the roots of the particular plant. So, just to recap, the three functions of a root. Roots are there to anchor and stabilize the plants to the ground so that they don't move around. Roots are also there to absorb water and nutrients from the soil. It gets absorbed into the plant, and it then goes to the rest of the plant wherever the plant needs it. And lastly, roots are there to also, and it's some roots depending on the type of plant, some roots are they store food, and we can then eat the food and make delicious food, or delicious meals out of the food, should I say. So let's have a look at some pictures. So here's just a picture of this particular root system. Look at how many roots, and this root system of this looks like grass. So if you see grass, if you happen to have a look at the roots of grass, has got more of an adventitious root system, which means it's like a net. It spreads itself out so that it can really absorb as much nutrients and water from the soil as much as possible. So have a look at this particular root system. It almost looks like the veins in your arms, but I'm going to come back to veins a little bit later when we talk about leaves. Right, let's have a look at the next picture. So this is, in this particular picture, you can see these root hairs that are on the root. So this is quite a magnified picture. And this over here is just another picture of this little seedling that's about to grow. Have a look that these roots over here, look how big the roots are. They're going quite deep into the ground to really anchor and stabilize the plant as the little seedling is making its way and it's going to grow. In our last picture, this is just a picture to show you how roots or plants use roots to store food. We've got a turnip, for example. You can see your carrots, onions, potatoes. So we actually eat certain roots of plants. So for those of you that didn't know, you now know something new. Okay, the next part of the plant we are going to look at is actually the stem of the plant. Now, the stems connect the roots to the rest of the plant, and the stem also has important functions. The first function of the stem is that it holds or supports the rest of the plant and holds it upright. So just think about, very similarly, how we have a backbone, our vertebrate. And just like how we've got a backbone to keep our bodies upright, the stem has the same function for a plant as well. The stem, as you can see in this picture, is keeping the plant upright, as strong as possible, so that the plant is also not droopy from left to right. The stem also carries or transports the nutrients and water from the roots to other parts of the plant, such as the leaves. So all of the water nutrients that is absorbed through the root hairs, then through the roots, then gets carried and transported. The next stop is going to be the stem. So almost think of the plant like a building. And you get into an elevator of a building on the ground floor, which is your roots. And as you get into that elevator, you then go to different levels of your building. And a plant is very similar to that as well, where your water and your nutrients travel to your different parts of your plant, starting from the bottom all the way up. Our last function of the stem is that some plants store food that they produce in their stems, such as asparagus. Now, I know when I was your age, I didn't like asparagus. I didn't like the taste of it, but as I got older, I learned to love asparagus. I particularly like asparagus on pizzas, funnily enough. So maybe as you get older, you'll like them. Or maybe some of you are sitting at home thinking, oh, I love asparagus. So I don't know. Okay, right. The next part of the plant that we are going to look at is the leaves. So leaves also have very important functions. And specifically, the very first function that leaves have is that leaves absorb sunlight and use it to make food for the plant. So all the sunlight is absorbed through the leaves. And before we continue, who can remember from yesterday's lesson what the term is that we use when plants make their own food? Does anybody know? Yes, for some of you that did say it, it is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants make their own food. And photosynthesis actually occurs in the leaves. The second function of the leaf is that some plants use their leaves to actually store water, such as a cactus, or some plants use their leaves to store certain foods like spinach or kale or lettuce. So when next time you eat a delicious salad, which is also nice and healthy, and you either eating lettuce or kale or spinach in your salad, always remember that those foods actually are the leaves of the plant. So are you starting to see that we can actually eat from the roots? We can eat the stem, asparagus, and celery. We can also eat the leaves as well. Lettuce, spinach, kale. And lastly, most leaves have got veins, and we have two types of veins in a leaf, and I'm going to show you in the next slide. The first type of vein is called a netted vein, and the second type is called a parallel vein. Now, these veins carry the food that the leaf makes to the rest of the plant. And again, this process is called photosynthesis. So let's have a look at these veins of a leaf. Right, so before we look into the veins, so I'm going to go into the veins, but I want to just go back to this particular picture. So just to show you the cactus, if you have to take a piece of cactus and break it in half, which I don't want you to do, I don't recommend that you do it, but cactus actually, or cacti, which is the plural, it stores a lot of water. Now remember, plants look the way that they look according to also the environment that they have adapted to. Cactus or cacti are commonly found in very hot environments such as a desert, where it is very hot and it doesn't rain that often, and so plants or a cactus has actually adapted to its environment by having these very thick leaves so that it can store as much water as possible, because it doesn't rain very often at all. Right, so that's just an interesting fact about cactus. And then here is your good old spinach. I love eating my spinach, and spinach, another interesting fact, is also full of iron, which is really, really good for you. Okay, so let's have a look at these veins that I was talking about. So I want all of you to just have a look at your arms, and have a look at your hands and try and find like the veins in your body. Now we have got veins throughout our body, and veins in our bodies are there to carry oxygen, either blood that's full of oxygen or blood that our bodies now use the oxygen and now there's carbon dioxide and we want to get rid of the carbon dioxide. But veins in our body carry all the nutrients and everything that we need in our bodies, around our bodies to where it is needed. And veins in a plant do exactly that. So this first picture over here is the veins. These veins are called a netted vein system of a plant. So I want you to have a look at wherever you are, whether you've got a plant inside, whether you've got a garden, go outside, have a look at the different leaves outside. Is the leaf a netted leaf? It almost looks like a net, that it's all woven together. Or we have veins on a leaf that look like this, and we call them parallel veins. And you can see these long lines that run parallel to one another. And for those of you that have learned the word parallel in maths, it means that the space between the lines are equal, there's equal distance between the lines. So we've got our two different veins of plants, and so go and explore, go and have a look. If you're able to look at the different leaves around you, is the leaf a netted vein? Is it a parallel vein? And remember what the function of veins are there. They're there to transport all the food that the plants make via photosynthesis to where the rest of the plant needs it. Okay, moving on to flowers. Now look how beautiful these pictures are. Flowers are magnificent because they come in an array of colors and shapes. Flowers are beautiful, but have you ever sat and thought, what is the function of flowers? So let's have a look. So the very first function of flowers is that flowers make pollen, which is needed to produce seeds from which new plants can grow. So if you have a look over here at this particular picture, there's pollen on this particular flower, and pollen is needed to make is part of the process of making new seeds. It's part of the process of when flowers reproduce, and we need pollen in order for flowers to reproduce and for seeds to form. Seeds are actually formed inside of flowers, and I'll talk about seeds when we get to it. The next function on flowers, about flowers, is that flowers are often brightly colored to attract birds and insects to help spread their pollen and bring and drop pollen from other flowers. So if you ever wonder why flowers are so bright and beautiful, it's actually to attract insects and other animals and creatures, because when that insect comes to the flower, so let's take a bee, for example. A bee looks at this beautiful yellow flower, lands on the flower to drink up all that delicious nectar. As it's drinking up that nectar, the pollen then sticks to the legs of the bee. The bee then goes to the next flower because his belly is not full, and so he goes to the next flower, and the pollen that he collected from the first flower then gets transferred onto the next flower. And so as the pollen moves and gets transferred from one flower to the next, the pollen then lands on the next flower, lands on the female part of the plant, and eventually through reproduction, seeds are formed. Right, and the last part of or function of a flower is that the flowers make fruit and seeds. So once once seeds are formed from the particular flower, some flowers make seeds that can be planted and new plants form from those seeds, or as the seed forms within that flower, seeds actually grow into fruit. Bet you didn't know that fruits are actually formed from the flowers of certain plants. Interesting. And lastly, flowers come in many different shapes and sizes. So we also use flowers for our own personal use, for aesthetic purposes. The word aesthetic means something really lovely to look at and to smell, because some flowers smell really beautiful, and so I'm sure that you've seen flowers in a vase, in your house or in a building, or maybe at school. Maybe you have seen flowers on your teacher's desk. So let's have a look at some pictures. So this first picture, look at this bee. He is covered in pollen, and he is there drinking the delicious nectar that flowers also produce. And he takes this pollen, and you can just imagine he then flies to this flower and that flower, and he drops the pollen, and the pollen is part of the male part of the plant, and drops it onto the female part, and together through reproduction, seeds then will later form. Here's another picture just showing again how beautifully colored the flowers are, and you can see, have a look at the shape of the different petals of the flowers, different petals, different sizes of flowers. And lastly, in this picture, we've got delicious blueberries. I love my blueberries. Blueberries are also filled with antioxidants, which is really good for the body, and blueberries are formed. Remember that I said that fruit are also formed from flowers as well. Right, moving on to the seeds. So you can have a look already at the different pictures of seeds, and many plants make seeds and store their seeds in various different ways, and we're going to look at those ways. So first of all, in their fruit, such as peaches and oranges. So have a look at this delicious apple. There are seeds in the middle of the apple. So seeds can be stored. Once the fruit is then formed from the flower, the seeds are there in the center. Or some fruits have seeds in the middle, some have them on the outside, such as your strawberries. Then in certain pods like beans and peas, so have a look at this picture here of beans. These are the seeds of beans, that they are also stored in pods. We also say that seeds can also be stored on cobs like a millie or sweet corn. How delicious would a millie be right now? Nice and hot, steaming. I enjoy my millies. I'm getting very hungry. Then other plants grow their seeds from the plant's flower, such as a dandelion or the acorns of an oak tree. So in this picture over here at the bottom, you can see a dandelion. Now, this brings back memories when I was little, and I used to love finding dandelions, and I used to pick a dandelion And when I was little, we would always say that as you blow a dandelion, you make a wish. So the next time you see a dandelion, you can think of me, pick your dandelion, and as you blow it, now these are actually little seeds on the dandelion. And that's how this plant has been so cleverly created, because as you blow the seeds, or as the wind blows the dandelion, the seeds are then spread so that the seeds can land on soil and eventually grow into a new plant. And lastly, as you can see, the acorns of an oak tree, the acorns are actually the seeds of an oak tree. So very interesting how seeds can come in various different shapes and forms and be stored in different ways as well. Okay, so I just want to run through the different parts of the plant. We started off with our root system, and remember our roots are there to anchor the plant. Food can also be grown as a root, such as your beetroot, your potatoes, your onions, and so on. And roots are there to absorb water and nutrients from the soil through the root hairs so that it can start traveling up the plant. Secondly, we had a look at the stem of a plant. And remember, a stem is there to hold the plant upright, keep it nice and straight, and water and nutrients travel up the stem to where it is needed. And we also can eat a certain stems of plants, such as your asparagus, or even celery. And I know many kids don't like celery, so that's okay. But one day you maybe will, never know. Then we had a look at the leaves of the plant. Now the leaves are quite important because this is the part of the plant where photosynthesis occurs. And remember, photosynthesis is when plants make their own food. Leaves are also really cool because leaves come in various different shapes and sizes. We have thin leaves, big leaves, massive leaves, very small leaves. But what's also cool about leaves is that there are veins on a leaf, just like the veins in your body. The two types of veins in leaves that we talk about is that we either have a netted veined leaf, where it looks like a net, or we have parallel veins on the leaf. Then we had a look at our flowers. We looked at the beautiful brightly colored flowers, and you can even see I've got another picture of a flower. Flowers are nice and bright to attract insects and birds and other creatures, because the more creatures come to that particular flower, then the pollen then is able to stick to that particular animal, and then they go off to another flower and they help. The pollen then lands on the other flower, and the process of reproduction of plants can start, and plants can then form new seeds through reproduction. Remember that flowers as well, as soon as seeds are formed, certain flowers can also grow into fruits that we can eat. Then lastly, we ended off with seeds, and we looked at how seeds can come in various different shapes and forms. We looked at seeds that are in the middle of fruits, seeds that are in pods like beans, seeds that are on a cob like sweet corn and millies. We also had a look at seeds like a dandelion can form sort of the outside, that if you blow it, or as the wind picks it up, it's able to travel and then land somewhere and plant. So this is just a summary of what we've done today, looking at the different parts of a plant. Now, before we end off, we are coming back to our KWL skill. At the start of the lesson, all of you wrote 5 points of information or knowledge that you already knew before I taught this lesson. Then you wrote 5 points on anything. Maybe it could have been questions of points of parts of a plant that you wanted to know. Maybe I've even answered some of those questions for you. Now, I want you to take a moment and I want you to write 5 points on absolutely anything that you have learned in today's lesson. It can be on any part of the plant. It could be any of the fun facts that I've told you throughout the lesson. But I want you to write 5 points on anything that you have learned in today's lesson. Right, and we are going to end off there. Grade 4s, it has been wonderful having this lesson with you today. I hope that you've learned lots. I want you to have a very wonderful weekend. Enjoy the weather. We've got beautiful weather. Stay safe, and I shall see all of you on Monday. Remember that my name is Miss Kun. Hakuna Matata. Be kind to one another. Bye.